Last week we talked about flying shoes, and this week we are talking about a microwave time machine. Everyday inanimate objects are apparently overpowered. Steins Gate is known as one of the best visual novels of all time. Of course, that is highly subjective, but it's up there. The game builds up the world in Ho and Kyoma's eyes. Over the course of 11 chapters, we see it shamble. Such is the will of Steins Gate. Psy Congaroo. Wait, not kangaroo.
そりゃ違うよ。
さよなら。誰なの？私も好きですよ。バカ！
Now initially, I didn't like Steins Gate. Hold on, I know what you're already thinking, and rest assured, I love the game. Initially, the Ho and Kyoma thing was annoying for me, but then you grow to like it, and when it finally kicks in back nearing the end of the game, after Okabe's timeless despair, you get chills. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Steins Gate is the tale of unique student Okabe Rintaro and his self-proclaimed mad scientist side of Ho and Kyoma, who accidentally makes a time machine called the Phone Wave, subject to name change, that can send email to the past. Unfortunately, he gets caught with so much more. No, this is going to be fucking long. Let me introduce you to the story of Steins Gate. Okabe Rintaro goes to a seminar based on time machines, lectured by Dr. Nakabachi. He is met by Makise Kudis beforehand, who came to him asking what he was trying to tell her. Of course, he had never met her before, and he goes all Ho and Kyoma on her. What I'm trying to obviously convey is this is a story about time machines, and whilst I normally wouldn't mention a minute detail well, as a quick aside, Steins Gate does an amazing job of sticking to these smaller details and making everything connect in the end. Daga. Otoko da. A weird time machine appears on the roof which has nothing to do with what I just talked about probably, and starts a commotion. Kyoma goes all, well, Kyoma during Nakabachi's seminar, and essentially ruins it. A scream is heard that sounds nothing like Kyoma's. And he rushes down to see that Chris is dead. Testing his new D-mail technology, what emails sent to the past are called, he sends a message to himself back in time, changing the world line from the beta world line to the alpha world line. It makes sense later. Afterwards, we get a long introduction to the characters. Kudis the Omega Tsundere does not die, and instead we find out her reason for coming to Japan from America is to give a lecture at Kyoma's school, amongst other things. Commotion is caused by Kyoma's and it leads to him meeting with Kudis again, and him revealing they made a time machine of sorts, which of course interests her. Brief character aside, Kudis is a genius girl tsundere who aids in Kyoma's research and has secretly written a paper on time machine theory. Daru is Okabe's best friend, and Supa Haka, computer whiz, who is also obsessed with girl games, dating sims, and is a total otaku. Most of us are Darus, aren't we? Mayuri is Kyoma's childhood friend, which of course is required no matter what visual novel you play, who is gentle, sweet, caring, and of course in love with Kyoma. Varys is our typical cat girl with the cat girl name who is also rich and precisely deceptive. Luca is a soft, gentle, cute person who is very caring for Okabe and his friends, and also secretly likes Okabe. Daga. Otoko da. Moika is a shy girl who lives by her phone, and she's a reporter. Not much goes on about her, suspicious. Braun is the owner of the CRT TV store down below that totally isn't a front for anything, suspicious. Suzuha is a random girl who showed up out of nowhere, who quickly gets friendly with Okabe and the gang, and takes a part-time job at Braun's, which is right below Okabe's lab. Suspicious. That's basically all you need to know. Kudis joins Kyoma's lab, and they experiment with the new machine, with which they send a few emails to the past, some with minor changes, such as winning the tertiary prize for the lottery, or larger changes, like making Luca a girl. Daga! Honota? Which Okabe finds out the hard way. Another large change is keeping Ferris's father alive, which changes the entire area they live in, due to Ferris not becoming the de facto head of the company, which means she can't infect the area with otaku culture. Eventually, it all comes to a head. With the help of Chris, they finally upgrade the phone wave, named Subject to Change, into the Time Leap Machine, which can not only send emails, but can also send a person's memories into the past. Essentially, it's no different than jumping into your previous self. CERN, an organization that researches time machines, picks up Kyoma's initial D-mail and finds out they research and successfully create a time machine. So, not good. They end up raiding their lab, and Mayuri dies, and Mayuri dies, and Mayuri dies. Okabe goes back every time to try to stop it, to no avail. Much to Okabe's despair, he is powerless to stop Mayuri's death. Essentially, in the Alpha world line that they are in, Mayuri is guaranteed to die. And so we get to Suzuha. Suzuha is from the year 2036, 26 years after this game takes place. CERN rules the world due to their success in the race towards time machines, and Daru and Okabe formed the anti-CERN resistance, and in doing so, sent Suzuha to the past to stop their current future. She describes the basic time theory her father and her uncle came up with. Spoiler, her father is Daru. She refers to Okabe as her uncle in the future, so she time traveled in the time machine found at the beginning of the game, and with no coincidence involved herself in the lives of her early father and uncle Okabe. She explains that world lines converge on specific events. To change world lines, at least a 1% convergence of the world line is needed, which basically just means they had to change the events through time travel to hope Mayuri wouldn't die, and that CERN doesn't take over the world. Okabe figures out that eventually CERN tracked their first D-mail and needs to increase the convergence, so he goes to undo the most important D-mails, turning Luca into a girl, keeping Varys' father alive, keeping Suzuha from leaving in her time machine, and Moika's message to herself, which we don't know. What we do learn though is Moika is a member of CERN, and part of the raid that always happens. They undo these D-mails to acquire a specific item called an IBM machine so they can hack CERN's secret database, which they had in the original timeline before all the D-mails were sent out. As CERN had caught their original D-mail, Moika had been sent to retrieve it by Okabe's aggressive landlord Braun, who was also working for CERN, unfortunately for Okabe. Okabe tracks men leading to Braun's house with their previous IBN, whereby Braun admits it before shooting the curious Moika for accompanying Okabe and Braun himself, leaving his daughter fleeing and Okabe speechless. This is where the endings diverge. If you choose not to send any of the undo D-mails, you can branch off to Suzuha's, Varys', and Luca's endings in that order. Otherwise, you're automatically going to be in Mayuri's, Curtis's, or the true ending, depending on how many true ending flanks you hit. I'll explain that soon, so bear with me. Each of the endings simply just explore each of the characters a little more, except for the final three I said, which are pretty similar but diverge in the end. The true ending in particular is the most surprising. The true ending is actually Curtis's ending, and the credits roll. Until they don't. Okabe finally finds himself back in the Beta world line where Mayuri lives and Curtis dies. If you remember in the beginning before he switched world lines. And he is distressed but in the end accepts his choice despite his love for Curtis that develops over the story. Until this world, Suzuha comes from the future. In this world line, World War III happens, and the only way to avoid it is to reach Steins' Gate. Steins' Gate is one of the illusions Kyoma made up, but because he goes on to research and eventually invent time travel, he theorizes a perfect world in which neither Mayuri or Curtis dies, and both CERN taking over the world and World War III don't happen. He calls this Steins' Gate. He goes with Suzuha back in time, with the goal that he must deceive reality without changing the events that already occurred, which is Kyoma seeing dead Curtis and Nakabachi taking Curtis's paper, which actually has the proper time traveling theory. The latter is undone by preventing Mayuri from doing a seemingly harmless thing in the intro, but the first is more complicated. Okabe actually fails in the first attempt, and ends up being the one who killed Curtis, which is why in the intro we end up hearing Okabe scream, which triggers Kyoma's curiosity, leading him to a dead Kudis. Crazy, right? And if you noticed, I called Okabe Kyoma when he is still in mad scientist mode, and Okabe after he starts losing it due to all the events that had been occurring. Going back to the unchanged present, he goes into complete despair, but is encouraged by Mayuri and himself 15 years in the future via a video D-mail to try again. These are more so explained by Steins Gate 0, but we'll get there eventually. He was told by Suzuha that it was actually his own plan for him to fail once, because if he hadn't, then the Okabe that made the video D-mail would not exist. With newfound confidence and information that requires him to deceive reality, he first undoes Mayuri's butterfly effect that originally prevented the time travel paper that Nakabachi stole from Kudis from being destroyed. Secondly, he attempts to prevent Nakabachi from killing Kudis, but also sets up the scene where it looks like Kudis had died. He provokes Nakabachi to stab him, and he spreads his blood everywhere. Finally, he stun guns Kudis so it looks like she died to his previous self without that actually being the case, avoiding a time paradox. This leads him to Steins Gate, which is of course the happy ending. There are exactly 6 endings, and most of them leave you feeling empty. Suzuha's ending has Okabe unable to send the D-mail, which lets Suzuha leave, and he replays the same 2 days over and over again, so he doesn't have to experience Mayuri dying or Suzuha leaving. If Suzuha does leave for the past, she forgets her memories and fails her mission, leading to her committing suicide. Okabe repeats these days until he has no soul, entertaining the thought of murder and rape since it doesn't matter as he can repeat the same days over and over. Suzuha deducts this and invites Okabe to come with him to the past. The end. Ferris's father died when she was young. When the D-mail is sent to prevent this, the entire area becomes more technology-based and less weeb-based, since it is Ferris's father in charge and not Ferris herself. Not sending the D-mail basically has Okabe not know any of his friends, but has him be Ferris's boyfriend. That's basically it. Luca's route is basically the same, ending with their relationship, and he's not a guy. Luca goes back in time, the only time someone else uses the time leap machine, barring one scene, to enjoy time with Mayuri before they accept her death, and they live sadly ever after. As a side note, Moeka doesn't have an ending, but if you don't immediately send the D-mail, you get a special side piece. Braun has a daughter, and we know he works for CERN, and in the future, his daughter will work for CERN. His daughter time leaps over a couple thousand times from 2025 to tell Okabe that she will torture him to death in 2025, and it's kinda fucking creepy. The Mayuri and Kudis endings end similarly, in that Okabe ends up loving said characters. However, either way, Okabe chooses to go back to the Alpha world line to save Mayuri. If you haven't gotten any true ending flags, you'll end with Mayuri, and you'll get a short scene with her after the time leap. If you have any true ending flags, but all of them, Kudis will show up before Okabe changes the world line to see him off, ending with Okabe dismantling the phone wave subject to name change and putting to rest Ho and Kyoma for good. The true ending picks up after this Kudis ending. This is a visual novel with a few mechanics, and they're convoluted enough to basically ensure you'll never get the true end without looking up a guide. This game uses the phone messaging and calling system to choose its endings, with the first couple being dependent on whether you send the undo D-mails, and the latter based on true ending flags, which you'd probably never figure out beforehand. Each text has different words you can reply to, and you have to reply to multiple specific words to hit the true ending or Kudis' ending. All of these messages involve Kudis. If you get 0 true ending flags, you get Mayuri's ending. If you get at least 1, but not all true ending flags, you get Kudis' ending. If you get all of them, you get the true ending, which is Kudis' ending, but with an added 11th chapter, that being the Steins Gate ending. Otherwise, the game is presented nicely. It has a tip system for Japanese culture things you may not know, like Clannad had, a detailed options menu, and a nice interface. The music is bloody brilliant. The art style is gritty and takes some getting used to, especially if you play things that look more like Doki Doki Literature Club or Senran Bunka, aka anime, but you'll come to love it. This game also has plenty of CGs. Honestly, this game gets a solid A in presentation. Steins Gate is incredibly immersive as it puts you in the shoes of Okabe and his mad scientist ways. It introduces the characters and the world slowly, before slowly beginning to take it apart in front of our eyes. Furthermore, this game is a part of the science adventure series for a reason. Science is a key theme of this visual novel, and it's expanded upon many times, and as a fellow lover of science, I can't not enjoy this. Steins Gate is one of the best visual novels of all time, but it's also one of the best animes too. There's not much to say about the anime because it follows the visual novel almost exactly, besides cutting extra content. Either read the novel, watch the anime, or do both. It is a must watch even after reading the visual novel, in my opinion. Frankly, I can't describe in words how much I enjoyed Steins Gate. I guess it is rated by the average reader the second best visual novel, behind the one I was supposed to have a video on about 35 weeks ago. If you want to see my part next week, of course, the true ending was my favorite. Whenever Okabe recovers from his time travel-induced depression and goes back into Kyoma mode after having not done so for a long time, it leaves the reader or watcher with a lot of emotion. This is true when Okabe recovers after his first failed attempt in the true ending, and it is also true in Steins Gate 0 when my favorite route is obviously the true ending, and whilst that is the main ending, I would have to give a special shout out to Suzuha's ending. Whilst the other endings generally have Okabe end up with the character, with a brief scene before the credits, the Suzuha ending is less about Suzuha and more about Okabe's desperate attempt to maintain the status quo of current reality without having to sacrifice someone. I believe this route is good extreme, as it shows how quickly the mind will deteriorate with a repetitive reality. Whilst Okabe only had his friend's best interests in mind before we entered this route, we can see he loses this motivation as he simply loses any passion he had for anything and anyone. Whether you like, comment, or subscribe has already been decided by Steins Gate, so I won't plead for you to do so. However, if you like this video, I've done a couple more. You may like them, so that's always a possibility. Finally, I'll leave you guys with this phrase I've already said once, but it's so much fun saying it, so feel free to say it with me. Psy Congaroo.